To really grasp the stakes of this chess match, we have to talk about a number: 1.6 million. According to historical records, in the year 655 AH, the Mongol commander Hulagu Khan completely leveled the great city of Baghdad. The sources describe an apocalyptic massacre where an estimated 1.6 million people were executed. Just to put that into perspective for a second, that was a staggering percentage of the global population at the time, just wiped out in a blink. The city was practically erased from the map in a way no one could have ever imagined. And the terrifying part? In the immediate aftermath, with the Caliph al-Mustasim dead and Baghdad in absolute ruins, Hulagu didn't just pack up and go home. His eyes immediately turned toward the remaining Holy Lands. His next ambition was to conquer Syria and Egypt, which directly threatened the very existence of Mecca and Jerusalem. The Muslim world was literally on the brink of total erasure. So who actually steps up to stop this unstoppable force? Enter Berke Khan, a grandson of Genghis Khan. Historical records actually debate his exact birth year. Mamluk ambassadors who met him later estimated he was born somewhere between 1207 and 1209. But actually, the Persian historian Juzjani places it a bit later, between 1219 and 1221, and modern historians like Jean Richard tend to favor that later date, pointing out that Berke's parents were married around 1220. Regardless of the exact year, Berke's rise through the ranks to his eventual ascension as a powerful ruler in 1257 would literally change the empire forever.
But to really understand Berke, you gotta look at his dad, Jochi Khan, because Berke inherited a very unique legacy. Jochi was a fierce warrior, for sure, but he surprisingly showed humanity to the conquered people of Bukhara. And well, because his approach didn't exactly match Genghis Khan's brutal policies of total bloodshed, Genghis actually removed his own son from his post and handed Bukhara over to Ogedei, who then unleashed a total bloodbath. Because of this rift, Jochi totally lost his chance to become the next great Khan.
Consequently, Jochi and his descendants basically got exiled to what were considered the most barren, unproductive outskirts of the empire. We're talking parts of the Caucasus and the Balkans. But against all odds, they transformed this seemingly useless land into the Golden Horde. It became an absolute powerhouse of a Khanate. And this is the superpower where Berke would eventually succeed his nephew to take control, ruling over both the blue and white portions of the empire. Now, here is where things take a massive turn. This geographic isolation set the stage for a huge personal transformation. In 1252, while traveling through that very same city of Bukhara to attend a high-level Mongol assembly, Berke encountered a Muslim caravan and met a Sufi dervish named Hazrat Saifuddin. Intrigued by their beliefs, Berke experienced a profound conversion to Islam. He became the very first Mongol leader to establish Islam as a state religion in a Khanate. He even encouraged his brother, Tuk Timur, to convert as well. Fast forward back to that horrific fall of Baghdad we talked about earlier. Because the empire was so massive, Berke Khan didn't actually hear about the bloody destruction until 5 or 6 months after it happened. When the news finally reached him, he was absolutely furious. The historian Rashid al-Din Hamadani records this exact quote where Berke vows, "With the help of God, I will call him to account for so much innocent blood." It was his historic, completely unprecedented vow of vengeance against his own cousin, Hulagu. But here's the reality check. This brings up a terrifying strategic dilemma for Berke Khan. How exactly do you halt an invincible, bloodthirsty army? I mean, if Berke simply sat back and let Hulagu continue, crusaders and political rivals would just help Hulagu conquer the remaining Holy Lands. But if Berke attacked directly, he risked the total destruction of his own forces against a much, much larger army. So, what does he do? Well, he doesn't just charge in blindly. That'd be suicide. Rather than a head-on collision, Berke initiated a brilliant, highly calculated three-pronged geopolitical strategy to distract, isolate, and paralyze Hulagu's forces. Let's break down exactly how he pulled this off, step by step. Step 1. And this is a literal masterclass in misdirection. Berke ordered his general, Barundai, to launch a brutal attack on Poland and Lithuania. They sacked multiple cities. Now you might be wondering, why attack Europe when his real enemy is Hulagu all the way in the Middle East? Because he was deliberately terrifying the European powers to force the Pope's hand in this global chess match. He needed to make Europe panic about the Mongols generally. And you know what? The strategy was flawless. Terrified by the attacks in Poland, the Pope issued a strict decree threatening to excommunicate anyone in the Christian world who dared to ally with the Mongols. Instantly, this stripped Hulagu of his most crucial allies. The Templars, the Crusaders, and forces from Georgia and Armenia were all forced to abandon Hulagu on the spot. All right, so Hulagu is now diplomatically isolated. Boom, step 2. Berke ordered continuous, relentless guerrilla attacks along the shared borders of his Golden Horde and Hulagu's Ilkhanate. This wasn't a full-scale invasion meant to conquer. It was meant to annoy and distract, and it worked. It forced a deeply frustrated Hulagu to divert massive numbers of his troops away from the Arab lands just to defend his own backyard. Because Berke was so busy distracting and bleeding Hulagu's forces on the border, an incredible opportunity opened up. Hulagu had previously sent his general, Kipuka, with a massive force of 100,000 elite troops toward Egypt. But without their European crusader allies to back them up, the Egyptian Mamluks, who Berke had very cleverly allied with, were able to decisively crush Kipuka's forces at the famous Battle of Ain Jalut, a massive turning point. Just when things couldn't get any more tense, history throws a massive wildcard into the mix for step 3. The sudden death of the great Khan, Mongke, threw the entire Mongol Empire into absolute political chaos. It triggered a high-stakes electoral council, known as a Kurultai, to choose the next supreme leader of the entire Mongol world. So we instantly get this massive proxy war. In the council, Berke made it a point to immediately oppose Hulagu's actions in Baghdad. Hulagu desperately wanted his ally Kublai Khan to become the Great Khan, so to counter this, Berke deliberately threw his support behind another candidate, Arek Bokeh. The Kurultai deadlocked, leading to a massive civil war between Kublai and Arek Bokeh. This was genius, because it kept Hulagu permanently distracted. He couldn't get any support from Kublai, who was way too busy fighting the candidate Berke had backed. Here is a super fascinating detail, though. As the head of the powerful Golden Horde, Berke totally had the juice to claim the title of Great Khan for himself. But the sources note he strategically stepped aside. Why? Well, because becoming Great Khan meant he would be strictly tied down by traditional Mongol laws and protocols. By intentionally not running, he kept himself off the leash. He retained the total freedom to act independently and continue his fierce defense of the Muslim world without any legal hindrance. Eventually, though, the proxy war ended when Arek Bokeh was defeated, and that freed up a very, very angry Hulagu Khan. Furious over his losses, especially that massive humiliation at Ain Jalut, Hulagu gathered his elite forces for a final, terrible march of vengeance straight toward Egypt. Diplomatic maneuvers just weren't going to cut it anymore. Berke Khan knew that to stop Hulagu from reaching the Holy Lands, he had to force a direct, inevitable clash in the region of Azerbaijan. The two titans finally meet at the Terek River. Berke Khan's forces stood as a literal wall between Hulagu and the rest of the Muslim world. In this epic confrontation, Berke delivered a catastrophic defeat to Hulagu, slaughtering over 100,000 of his men. To put that in perspective, that was an almost unimaginable loss of military power for the era. The threat to Egypt and the holy cities was violently and decisively halted. Berke Khan literally acted as a human shield for the Muslim world right up until his dying breath. Even after Hulagu passed, the conflict continued. Between 1266 and 1267, while preparing to attack Hulagu's son Berke Khan and crossing the Kura River, Berke Khan fell seriously ill and passed away. He left the leadership of the Golden Horde to his brother's grandson, Mengu Timur, who made sure to continue his exact policies. When you look back at it, Berke Khan's enduring legacy is just staggering, and it is the perfect example of how behind-the-scenes strategy shapes the world we live in today. He created the first Mongol state to formally adopt Islam. He forged a critical strategic alliance with the Egyptian Mamluks, and honestly, most importantly, his masterful blend of brutal warfare and ingenious diplomacy permanently secured the survival of Mecca, Jerusalem, and the wider Muslim world from what seemed like inevitable destruction.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a seriously chilling thought that historians still debate today. What if Berke Khan hadn't converted? What if these two Mongol superpowers, Berke and Hulagu, had united their massive armies instead of fighting a bitter civil war? If that combined Mongol war machine had swept through the Middle East entirely unchallenged, would the modern world as we know it even exist today? It is a massive what-if that really highlights just how much history can turn on the decisions of a single mastermind. Thanks for joining me on this deep